All right, Canio, the founder of this place, is here with us today. Please give him a warm welcome. Yes, we do have two of our three boutique readers from the anthology with us today, and I'll say a few words about the process at Catherine's request. She was very interested in how I was able to get 179 poets from, mostly still alive, but some of them recently left this realm. But people all the way from Pulitzer Prize winners and Poets Laureate of San Francisco, legends in poetry, to people that might be wandering down the street on the Lower East Side, but are also poets. So it's quite a range of voices in this collection, And so she asked me, how did that happen? So I'm going to take a couple minutes. And I certainly can't answer that question completely, but I can give it a whack, because it's worth knowing about. I mean, I've been collecting poetry and publishing it since I founded the Long Island Quarterly in 1990. Walt's Corner, which I was doing for the Long Islander, Walt Whitman's paper in 1988, starting then. So over the years, and then through Poetry Bay in the year 2000. So I mean, I do have a history of reaching out and collecting people's work and getting them, compiling them, and putting them out in collections, annual anthologies. So I'm not a stranger to it, but I certainly have never produced anything like this, and I gave up doing anything that's hard copy a while ago, really, because because of the complexity of putting together hard copy stuff, which many of you know how difficult it is. The electronic world bid me come, and I came, and I've done a lot of work electronically. But this particular project, for several reasons, was one which really, I believe, merits having come out as a hard copy production. So it has that sort of durability that things that happen electronically does not necessarily have. I certainly wouldn't presume to have done the equivalent of the seminal collection of poets, beat poets of New York City, New York poets, poetry anthology from the 1950s, that really created a landmark and a milepost for alternative bohemian beat and experimental literature in America in the 50s. But I felt that there was an appropriate time, as New York City was going through one of its many transitions, the pandemic, out of maybe into and maybe coming out of gentrification a little bit, to create a snapshot of what was there. And that was the concept. It was not my concept, it was the concept of a small publishing house in San Francisco, Blue Light Press, Diane Frank. I don't know if you've met Diane, but she's originally a New Yorker. She does some very nice publications. And she does, Blue Light Press did an anthology of San Francisco poets, and it was nice. She got it in airport bookstores, and it was on the Amazon.com splash, bestseller list for 2 days or 3 days or a month or something like that. And so she said, so she got ambitious. She said, George, do one for New York. And I was like, yeah, I will. But it can't be the size that you did. Now, you and I and all of us know that to do a comprehensive catalog of all the poetry, comprehensive thing, in San Francisco would probably take 600 pages or 1,000 pages. But New York, 2,500 pages. And then you would leave somebody out and they would be pissed off at you. So I had to, that was the balance, that was the primary problem, was balancing, getting it out sufficiently so I got representations of cross sections of different threads of communities, and from Latinx and the New Yorican scene, and getting people from the last poets from that era of black poetry, downtown stuff, midtown stuff, uptown stuff. People who grew up here but went on to somewhere else, like Diane DePrima or Lawrence Filighetti or Jack Hirschman, and but remembered this place and had faint poems of reminiscence of what it was like growing up and going to the penny candy store around the L, where they first fell in love with unreality. It's one of the poems I read up here for you, the Filighetti thing. So finding that mix between something that was 100 pages and 2,500 pages was the big challenge. The mechanics of it, if you want to talk shop, or maybe I'll talk to you afterwards, so I can get back up here and talk to you shop about how it is that I managed to be able to get various constituencies in this thing. Suffice it to say that I've been doing this for 30 years, so I have a lot of networks. But I'm not hardwired into many of these networks. So I did turn to Nancy Mercado for help with reaching out to Latinx poets, to Jeff Wright for the St. Mark's Poetry Project poets, because I'm not that connected to those particular scenes. Bob Holman was also very helpful. So that was part of it. But at a certain point, I felt like I had more than just a fabric, but I had a real cloth. You know what I mean? Bringing all these threads together. And so, just like my mother when she used to cross stitch and hook rugs, and I realized that there was a point where I had to stop, or otherwise it'd just become too massive and impossible for anybody to pick up. So that's if there's any art to editing, I think it's that. It's knowing when you have a complete fabric and knowing when to stop. I guess it was Laurence Olivier said, always be wanting more. And of course you could want more. And maybe if there's anything that comes out of this book, it would be that people go like, oh my God, yes, I know about New York. I know New York is a vortex, is for poetry, for the arts. And I realize now that it's an enduring, poetry is an enduring thing in New York City, because I see what it was doing in 2022. To try to make that happen, I have had 25, I'll be having 25 different readings. Some of them 20 people, 25 people, popping up, reading one poem or two poems, some of them Zoom, some of them live. Some of them more boutique-y. I had M.L. Leibler and John Sinclair in Detroit put on a Zoom reading, and it was all very hip dudes, in that particular one. I had people in Dallas put on the show. San Francisco as well. The Tompkins Square Library, we had some very fine poets come to read there. So the mix between having a small pop-up boutique type readings and large, ensemble type readings is part of a different process, which I think is very interesting as well. I'll tell you this: the book has been on the Amazon.com bestseller list for 4 months. March, April, May, June. And Diane Frank is freaking out. She doesn't want to be jealous. But I bet she's all admiration for it. But she's like, what did you do? Well, I made sure that when we put the thing out at AWP, Michelle was at AWP, I made sure that the book was already available in local bookstores across the country, independent bookstores across the country, including Canio, in San Francisco and Dallas and San Antonio, and Detroit, and Cleveland, and a bunch of locations, which over the years I've been to those places and I've read at them, and so I have relationships. So it was, pulling together something to give it buzz. I'll tell you, I used to ghostwrite for an economics professor who wrote for, well, he still writes for Forbes. And I learned something about marketing by ghostwriting this guy's work for Forbes. And I learned that, there are some marketing tools, even though poetry is like the difference between prose and poetry is prose get paid for it. There's no money in, but still there is marketing techniques. And so I did apply some of these marketing techniques that I picked up by ghostwriting for $100 a month for this rich man, PhD in economics. So I got paid off with it. So that's really all I want to say about that. I think it's a super collection, and you'll find many friends here. You'll find people that you know by reputation. You'll know some of their poems. Some of these poems are some of their most famous poems. And I did have to cut it off with people that were recently deceased. So, and Robert Bly is in it. He died while I was working with him on this collection. And several other people. So in a way, it's a commemorative thing. I remember at one reading, Janine Palmy Vega stood up to say something about this poet from the beat scene who passed on at a gathering for this guy. And Janine said, "We're all moving up the bench." We're all moving up the bench, and I'm moving up the bench, and I don't know how many more years I've got myself, So we all play a part, whether it's as a beginner, as a novice, or we're part of the scene, we lead in the scene, we're elder statesmen in the scene, and we're gone, and we move up the bench. And so I wanted to, at this point in my life and my career in poetry, to be able to create something that marked this place on that in my career. So that's it. I don't think I should say anymore. What I'll do.
It may not be money, but there's clapping.
There's and there's great people. There's great people in the scene. That you meet in so many different contexts. I remember Star Black at the KGB bar when they used to smoke in the KGB bar, and you have to cut through the smoke to get to the bar. She and David Lehman put on a very good reading series there for many years, and now she's out here. And one of the things that brings these people together, and Cornelius comes to work for him as well, is the Stony Brook connection. He was at Stony Brook as well. And Star was at Stony Brook. When she says Stony Brook, she was Southampton, and so was Michelle. So that's a connection. And of course, even though I said Amazon.com, you can just wipe that from your thinking and say, look, if I want to buy this thing online, I'll get it from an independent bookstore, and I'll contact them and have them get the book for me.
Bookshop.org.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, there you go. Because I'm a firm believer in that. Canio and I, just before this reading, were talking about an old bookstore that back in the 60s in Huntington, Oscar's bookstore. Oscar smoked a cigar in his own bookstore. And he was there for many years and is gone now. Even Book Review is gone. So these operations, independent bookstores, are our lifeblood. They're our lifeblood for us. Which is another subject. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce two of our readers, and hopefully, if Cornelius comes, I'll get a chance to introduce him as well. And the first one I want to introduce is Star Black. And you can read her bio in the back of the book. But Star, is more or less, she's a permanent resident out here now. I remember seeing her in the Woolworth building, doing a reading and an art show at the Woolworth building, and she was all over New York City for so many years, and really an inspiration to me about what you could accomplish as an entrepreneur and as a servant of other poets in the servant poetry community over the years. And now she's out here, and she's a tried and true member of the Sag Harbor community. She's going to read you her poems and talk about them. Please welcome Star Blackett.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for coming. And fortunately, the poetry world has people like Canio and George to hold us all together, and Canio and Catherine and Marianne to keep it all going, because we are a community. And just the joke about poetry is, if you make your life's dedication to poetry, in terms of money, abandon all hope. I mean, if you write fiction, there's hope. If you make paintings, there's hope. If you make pottery, there's hope. But poets are purists, They understand that you're making art for no money. Therefore, they have a certain cachet. Because they're lunatics. So here we go. They're all different kinds of poets. I'm representing the old ladies. I never used to represent this group, but lately I've been guided towards this identity without even wanting to be. It's just a calling. So I was struggling with this getting older situation, and I thought, what lies ahead at the end of the bench? Death. Death. This is where I'm going. So I was at an art colony. Catherine Levy and I go to VCCA a lot, Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. It's this wonderful collective of artists, and we love it there. And I was in my little studio, and I thought, what am I going to do? Death is en route. I mean, I got to do something about this. And so I came across an article called Accepting Your Old Age. And the person writing this article quoted the wonderful writer Montaigne. And this is the quote that I read it before starting my sequence on death. To begin depriving death of its greatest advantage over us, let us deprive death of its strangeness. Let us frequent it. Let us get used to it. Let us have nothing more often in mind than death. So I thought, okay, I'm stepping to the plate. I'm going to tackle this subject. I'm going to get going on it. And so I wrote a whole sequence of poems on death right before COVID. So it kind of undermined it when death was real. It's supposed to be imagined. It's not everybody's supposed to be dying. No sooner the COVID goes, then we have all these wars. No sooner than the wars happen, we have the prospect of losing everything we know and love, democracy. So it's kind of a weird situation to be in. People aren't going to, but I did ask a poet in New York, Tom Slay, who is a political poet. I said, Tom, before I read there recently, Tom, are you interested in funny poems about death? He said, yeah, I am. So I got a little encouragement. So this is, I'm just going to read 3 poems that our hero, George Wallace, hello, the collective hero. One more hand for a person who spent many, many hours on a topic that earns nothing financial. Oh, except you're a bestseller. So he's like doing it. He's doing the thing, making poetry a bestseller. Okay, So this is about getting older, age. It's called Fortitude. One thing that's nice before I begin about getting older is you're not scrambling to achieve so much. You know, that idea that you're not there yet, that you've got to go somewhere, that you've got to be somebody, that you've got to make it. You know, when you get older, you kind of say, I didn't make it. It didn't happen. But you know what? A day at a time, I got to go face death. So this is called Fortitude. The end of ambition. How liberating. Overthinking subsides to incremental bird bath robins and other things below an increasingly low ceiling. Urgency, its status jockeyed racetracks, lip syncs its sorcery upon the young. But how can that be when everybody's young? It can. 7 years of basement tax returns do not belong to everyone. Trojans on hot nights turn gray. When you're offered a seat on the subway, you know it's bad. Okay, these poems were taken from this project I did on death. So I was thinking of titles on death, and just death in general. So I came up with this death title, The Blank Portrait. Death, the blank portrait. Dying cities expire slowly. They cloud, swap industries. I'm sorry to interrupt myself, but I have to tell you, these poems are laden with the Trump era. Laden, saturated, dripping with the despair of that presidency. The Blank Portrait. Dying cities expire slowly. They cloud, swap industries, values for publicity that is too loud. Once rambunctious, they slump, blinkered, top-notch achievers, far too few. Death spins kitten yarn in a corner of Alborada, a telenovela. Never to slip in too soon, it's foxy. 100-year-old soldier bows in a fishbowl of bigotry. Oops, what was once a titmouse is a rotunda trophy. The situation is dire. Death moves to Mexico, drops out. It can't be speed dialed. And my final poem is, I was just thinking what it feels like when everything you believe in, like a president who loses an election, acknowledging and welcoming the next president, doesn't happen. So everything that's a fundamental belief is being threatened, and I think it's emotionally exhausting for everybody, you know. And I tried to write about the popular vote, because even the popular vote doesn't mean anything. We don't have the power to have one vote. So we're all separated from what's happening and what may happen. And I think that the recent years have made that even more scary, not to be in control. So this is a New York poem. It's about Rockefeller Center, and it's called Plutus, which is a god of war somewhere in mythology. A giant frozen poinsettia is lighting up Rockefeller Center, a garbled holiday when atheism is lethal and it is outright treason to be antithetical. One must join the Cub Scouts to arson trees, pump profits from creek beds in North Dakota, caged deadheads from Mexico, or like hysterical women leave expat Sweden with weaned Americans. The goo is unswallowable. No one can look at the foxed fable, his ornamental tome of bromites, his teed-off toxic burnout on insulin for a big whopper to royal zealots on a steely crusade. The loneliest janitor can't sweep dung heap from an unbearable cave.